All right. Let me get some more light in here, first of all. It's a little blurry. So as the title suggests, these are times where you can't stay silent. And I don't really know what to say because I'm a middle-aged white lady who could easily be dismissed as a Karen. And at this current point, the systemic racism in American culture has reached a boiling point. And on one hand, if you stay silent, you're part of the problem. On the other hand, being the demographic that I am, I think that saying anything would sound trite coming from me. I mean, what could I possibly like? I could tweet out Black Lives Matter and then feel very smug about being woke on Twitter, but that isn't helpful. And I'm trying to think of a way to be helpful in these times, the best that I know how. So in my core, I am an artist. It's what I do. It's not always how I make money, but it is who I am. It's what I do. And I'm taking my writing seriously again during quarantine and put myself on a schedule. And I'll come back to my point on that in a second. So what I can offer is my perspective as an artist. And I do realize that that doesn't help very much immediately when there were people being shot at and gassed and killed. And Los Angeles is on a curfew now, and we see all these images about the protests being escalated with police brutality. And I understand that it's saying, oh, well, I'm an artist and this is how I'm going to contribute. It sounds very convenient sitting here in my apartment and just musing to YouTube. But on the other hand, it really is what I can offer. And that's what I can do today. And maybe tomorrow I can do something more. But I feel the need to speak out because I don't think any of us should stay silent right now. So to come to my point, it starts at the beginning of quarantine, and I can't remember who tweeted this out, and I would have to look back to my timeline, but they were talking about back in March when times were simple. If you are it was a television writer. She said, like, listen, if you're a TV writer, think about what you want to create in quarantine. Because when we come out, nobody wants to hear about more quarantine. We were there. Nobody wants to hear about apocalypse, dystopian doom, because we're kind of over it. So think about do you want? Think Star Trek, like an optimistic future. Think in lines of that, like what do people want to see in the world? And that stuck with me, and I really wish I could remember who tweeted that out. And then yesterday, I stumbled across this old interview. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, but this old interview like 3 years ago with Grant Morrison. And he was talking about how he's kind of over American comics because American art, comics, TV, movies has become very dystopian. And he said that, and I just kind of went, it's true, because life and art reflect each other. So I absolutely see in American television and comics, we expect dystopia. We have accepted it as inevitable in our culture. And that's terrifying. And then you look at it this past week especially, but really the past few years, look at this week, especially with the riots and the protests and the retaliate. I mean, and even like I was on Twitter just a few minutes before streaming, and like the images and the news, it just doesn't stop. And it really does feel like we're at the tipping point right now, today. This is the tipping point. So going back to writing and being an artist, and what can you offer as an artist? Because my God, what can any of us do to help during these times? Well, the Grant Morrison interview made me think of this. But all right, so I mean, if you're new here, welcome. I'm a total geek. But let's save the world through comics, shall we? So for those of you who are Sailor Moon fans, or who are just 90s anime fans in general, I highly recommend this book, Warriors of Legend. It basically explains Sailor Moon specifically, and to a larger extent, 90s anime. This was published, I think, in 2003, 2005. Explains the references, the Sailor Moon references that an American or generally Western audience just wouldn't understand. And if you have the book at home, please feel free to follow along on page 97. And for the sake of honesty, I'm going to skip a few paragraphs in the middle, but I just want to get this point across. Because basically what we're going to talk about here is that when a culture or society has reached the point where it has collapsed or has just reached its breaking point, you have two choices. Accept dystopia or rebuild it so much better than you could have imagined. And I really think that America is at the point where if we choose now, we can rebuild better than we think we can have. So let me just reference what got me started on this. And if you don't know Crystal Tokyo or Sailor Moon, I'm sorry. You're going to have to Google it later. But basically, Crystal Tokyo is an archetype of the reconstructed post-apocalyptic city. This is not unique to Japanese literature, but this particular rebuilding after an apocalyptic disaster is the result of a cultural imprint on the Japanese psyche, post-atomic memory. The founding of Crystal Tokyo and the imagery of its destruction is the cultural legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so what does that have to do? What does that have to do with creating and art? Well, as the only country to have suffered an atomic bombing, Japan has been opposed to nuclear weapons ever since the end of the American occupation in 1952. All right, let's think about that. Japan literally suffered atomic apocalypse. They did it. They survived the fucking bomb and rebuilt better. This opposition and the visual imprint of nuclear apocalypse have seeped deep into the Japanese cultural psyche. Post-atomic themes are common in Japanese fiction. You see, I'm coming back around. With some of the best known being the films Godzilla and Akira. The specter of nuclear war still haunts Japan, and the creation story of Crystal Tokyo, of Tokyo being completely devastated and undergoing an ice age, depends on atomic imagery. And that brings me back to what can I offer, and what can any of you who are also artists out there? Yes, we can donate to Black Lives Matter charities and societies. I can't think. I'm thinking. I did not organize my thoughts very well before I logged on. I'm sorry, but yes, we can donate to Black Lives Matter causes. You can go out and protest. And there are probably things that we can think of later today, tomorrow. Run for Congress, petition your congressmen and your senators, get out the vote, whatever. Yes, there are things we can do. But also through our daily mundane lives, if you're an artist, let's think about Crystal Tokyo. What does a post-systemic racism America look like? What is that image? And instead of imposing this self-fulfilling prophecy of dystopia that has been apparent in American movies and comics and TV in these past couple of decades, instead of embracing dystopia, let's put out touchstones of what this enlightened society looks like. Now, again, systemic racism is not my experience. I was born with a lot of white privilege. I can only speak from a kind of anthropological perspective. I have not lived through this. I have observed it, but I have not lived through it. But I started thinking about my own writing. What if my characters, with their own white privilege, I write what I know, let's be honest. But what if they lived in a society without this kind of racism? What if they lived in a kind of crystal Tokyo in America? What would American crystal Tokyo look like? And what I basically want to put out there today is, if any artists see this, and if you agree, I think it's very important for us to plant the seeds. Let's use our arts. Let's use our art forms for good, whatever they may be. For me, it's writing. Maybe you're a painter or a singer. But let's put out those little touchstones, those little cultural touchstones of an enlightened society. And that way we can stop the self-fulfilling prophecy that we've kind of ingrained subconsciously in our heads, and create something that we couldn't even expect it to be so good. Let's leave that for the next generation. We can do it. I really do think we can do it. As hard, like I'm so frustrated. I should not have got on Twitter right before I came on this live stream, because I'm so frustrated and heartbroken and I can't organize my thoughts, and I'm sorry. But I do think there's something that is 10 times better than we can imagine, just waiting for us. We just need to start creating it. And if you don't know how to create an entire society by yourself, then start with you. What can I create through a picture? What can I create through a film? You know, let's put it out there, like as within, so without, if you believe in that kind of philosophy. And that's like basically concludes what I wanted to say. And again, if there's anything else you could, I don't want to be trite about, well, I'm an artist, so I'm going to write America into enlightenment. There are, of course, practical things we can do every day. Donate, protest, talk to your racist uncle at Thanksgiving. My fellow white people, I'm talking to you. We've got to step up our game. But let's start with what we do every day. You create every day, let's create something new. Let's do it. Support Black artists. Listen to what they have to say. All right, well, I don't really know how to conclude this, but I'll post this. I'll keep this video up for as long as I can stand. Thank you for listening to my musings, and I'm going to end it there. And again, being the demographic I am, there really isn't anything too much more insightful that I can offer. So I'm going to end the stream, and thank you for listening. Stay safe.